We are looking at cellular respiration now, and if you're following along in your book, we're in Chapter 9, specifically Section 9.1 if you want to follow along. We're going to be talking about what happens when you eat and your body converts that into food. So how does your body burn that food and turn it into usable energy? And so we're going to take a look at that today, which is called cellular respiration. Organisms get the energy they need from food. Okay? And energy is stored in food as calories. Okay? And it's measured in calories, which is why you always look at the labels of food and it tells you how many calories are in it, like 210 or 500 or 250, or like in a diet pop there's 0 calories. Okay. So what exactly is a calorie? Well, it's the amount of energy needed to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree Celsius. So how much heat energy would it take to take 1 gram of water, which is like the equivalent of a paper clip, the weight of a paper clip, 1 degree Celsius? Many times you'll hear calories referred to as kilocalories. So 1 calorie, capital C, is a kilocalorie. It's actually 1,000 calories. Okay, and that's how sometimes calories are labeled. Not too often on your food though, because otherwise we'd see calories of 0.5 or 1 on your food, which would actually mean 1,000 calories. So the kilocalorie is used in science, some, but it is not the way that your food would be labeled. So what contains the most calories in what you eat? So like sugar, if you have 1 gram of sugar, it will release 3,811 calories when it is burned. And by release, I mean release heat energy. 1 gram of triglyceride fat, which you would find a lot in beef, like in meat, would release almost 9,000 calories of heat energy when the food is broken down. Carbohydrates and proteins contain about 4,000 calories, or 4 kilocalories, and fats contain about 9,000 calories. The main thing is that your cells don't simply burn food and then release energy as heat. They break down the food molecules very gradually, capturing little bits of energy at each of the steps. And this enables the cell to use the energy stored in the chemical bonds of the food, like glucose, to produce ATP. Cellular respiration is basically breaking down sugar, glucose, and turning it into energy and waste products of carbon dioxide and water. It's the opposite of photosynthesis. So like plants had to go through photosynthesis to make the sugar that is used here in cellular respiration. Okay, we as humans just consumed this sugar. We just ate it. It's in our food. But plants had to make it first. So respiration is essentially the opposite of photosynthesis, and it is the photosynthesis formula backwards. So it's the oxygen plus the sugar will make carbon dioxide plus water plus stored energy. So it is the opposite of photosynthesis. So for a plant, photosynthesis makes the sugars, and then respiration breaks down that sugar that was made. For us, humans, we eat our food and sugars, and then respiration breaks them down into usable energy. And this happens in 3 steps. So that's some energy is trapped and not all of it's lost. It happens in a slower 3-step process. That 3-step process first involves glycolysis, and glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm. The Krebs cycle, which takes place in the mitochondria, and the electron transport chain, which also takes place in the mitochondria. So the mitochondria, if you remember back from when we looked at cells, the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It's the energy producing portion of the cell. So we're going to look more in depthly at these 3 processes in our next podcast. But if you look on page 252, it shows you how the glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm of a cell, followed by the electron transport chain and the Krebs cycle that take place inside the mitochondria. Respiration can take place with or without oxygen. Now, oxygen is a vital component in the formula, and respiration is much more efficient with oxygen. So it's an aerobic process. We refer to it as an aerobic process. It requires oxygen. Okay. The Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, which is where 90% of the energy for your body is produced during the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain. 90% of the energy is produced there. That is aerobic. It must have oxygen. Glycolysis can take place in an anaerobic environment without air. But glycolysis is step 1 and only produces a small amount of energy. Oxygen has to be present in order for the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain to take place. So the whole entire process of respiration will stall if there's no oxygen present. And that will lead to fermentation. So glycolysis will keep running, and it's going to be producing an acid in glycolysis. And if there's no oxygen, then those acids that are produced during glycolysis will start to ferment and build up in your body. So oxygen is essential for that process because without it, the second 2 steps of respiration stall and don't continue. So aerobic versus anaerobic respiration must have oxygen for the entire process to happen. And this is why aerobics class is called aerobics, because it requires oxygen. It's where the term comes from. So photosynthesis and cellular respiration, they are opposites of each other. Respiration is the photosynthesis formula backwards. It's the energy flowing in opposite directions. Photosynthesis deposits energy. So it's depositing energy in the form of making glucose. Cellular respiration withdraws that energy so that it's used. It's a energy being released when your body needs it or when a plant needs it. So photosynthesis removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and cellular respiration puts it back. Photosynthesis, we know that a waste product of photosynthesis is oxygen, and then cellular respiration uses that oxygen to release energy from the food. So it is one very large, big cycle. And if you look on page 253 in your book, you will see how photosynthesis makes glucose and oxygen that is then used in respiration to produce ATP and heat energy, and waste products of respiration are water and carbon dioxide that are then needed for photosynthesis in one very large cycle. So in this diagram, you see here was photosynthesis. It produced oxygen as the waste product and glucose. Cellular respiration uses that oxygen and that glucose to make ATP, energy stored in ATP, and heat. A waste product of that is carbon dioxide in water that is then used in photosynthesis. So completing the cycle between respiration and photosynthesis, they are all connected.